In terms of now that we've looked at cognitive development, you're also expected to know and be able to be assessed on social development as well. And as you can see, that covers our entire biopsychosocial model. So now we look at the Erikson's theory of personality development. So Erikson believed that personality developed through a combination of the effects of psychological changes in an individual, as well as social factors, their experiences and interactions with others. So this looks a lot like the biopsychosocial model. It's just missing those biological factors in theory. But Erickson identified 8 stages over the lifespan, and unlike Piaget, that looks at the child's development, Erickson's stages look at a person's whole entire life from birth to death. During each stage is based around the individual dealing with some sort of psychosocial crisis, a big conflict that is normal for the stage and normal for the age group of that person that needs to be resolved so they can move into the next stage. And if it doesn't, we have some sort of negative outcomes, mental illness, etc., etc. So then a person's personality would be shaped how they deal with these crises, whether that's productive or not. If the crises are resolved, the person is likely to have a positive, healthy, productive, agreeable personality. But if they're not able to move past the conflict of each stage for each age group, it would indicate the opposite. It would indicate that they have a negative personality traits. Okay. So we can see all stages listed. You should have a summary table like this in your note because this is really handy. But as you can see, you do need to know the age ranges, okay? And then the psychosocial crisis for each. As you can see, they're all 2 words and they're all opposing characteristics, one positive and one negative. That indicates the outcome of each stage for that person, whether it's a positive outcome or a negative outcome. So for the crisis to be successfully resolved, it should be in favor of the positive characteristic. But the negative characteristic can still exist to some degree. People are not black and white. So the infant could have trust in their caregiver at the end of the stage, but it's not ultimate trust. There is still a level of mistrust. And that would be normal. It's the problem when this negative characteristic is overbearing, such as they have that disorganized attachment. Okay. So I'll do a more detailed account of each stage and what you need to know about it. And then the next slide presents a sort of more like a summary of the stage. So for trust versus mistrust, the stage is also known as hope as the outcome. So this is where infants need to be able to learn that adults can be trusted, and they do this mostly through their caregiver. When adults meet a child's basic needs for survival, usually their parents. Infants are dependent upon their caregivers during this stage. So caregivers that are responsive and really sensitive to the baby's needs will help them to develop a sense of trust more so. And then the baby will see the world as a safe, predictable place. Thus, the outcome of this stage is called hope, the positive outcome. And unresponsive caregivers who do not meet their baby's needs can cause those feelings of anxiety, fear, mistrust, lack of hope in the world. And the baby is likely to see the world as unpredictable and an untrustworthy place. Especially if infants are treated cruelly or their needs are not being met appropriately, they will likely grow up with a general sense of mistrust for everyone. Then the next stage is autonomy versus shame for all of you. Obviously, autonomy means freedom, free will, and then there's shame and doubt. So, the positive outcome of this stage is supposed to be will, your ability to choose what you want to do and accept the consequences of that action. So that's if the kid is leaning towards autonomy during this stage. So toddlers, age 1 to 3 years, start to explore their world. They start to learn that they can control their actions and do things in their environment to get certain results. They begin to show more clear preferences for certain elements of their environment, such as the food that they prefer, the toys, the clothing that they prefer. And a toddler's main task begins to resolve the issue of autonomy versus shame and doubt by working to establish their independence in the world. So we might observe, for example, a really growing sense of autonomy and independence in a 2 year old child that wants to choose her clothes and dress herself by herself. Maybe her clothes might not be appropriate for the weather or the situation, but because she's allowed her input in basic decisions, this has an effect on her sense of independence. She begins to feel that she has free will. Okay. And if denied the opportunity to act on her environment, she might begin to doubt her abilities, which can lead to feelings of low self esteem, and feelings of shame and doubt. So that's that stage. Next, looking at initiative versus guilt, which occurs between the ages of 3 to 5 years. This one is initiative versus guilt is supposed to result in a sense of purpose if leaning towards initiative, the positive quality. So preschool children begin to be capable of initiating activities and asserting control over their world through various social interactions and play. And according to Erickson, preschool children have to resolve this task of initiative versus guilt. How do they do this? By learning to plan and achieve goals while interacting with other kids. They're able to develop that sense of initiative, a sense of ambition and responsibility, when the parents allow the child to explore within limits and then support the child's choices so that they're enabled that idea of showing initiative. So those children would develop self-confidence and feel they have a sense of purpose. But those who are unsuccessful, who do not show initiative or they have over-controlling parents, they might develop feelings of guilt instead. The fourth stage is the industry versus inferiority stage that occurs during those uh, elementary school years, and that is supposed to result in competence. So this is where children begin to compare themselves with their peers to see how they measure up and how they compare to their schoolmates. So they'll either develop a sense of pride in accomplishment in their schoolwork, their extracurriculars, hobbies, sports, family life, or they will feel inferior and inadequate because they feel they don't measure up to that standard. If children don't learn to get along with others or they have negative experiences at home or with peers, an inferiority complex might develop into adolescence and adulthood. So this is why it can be very harmful. Now, the identity versus role confusion stage is linked to puberty and maturing, and it's supposed to result in fidelity if successful. So this is where an adolescent's main task, according to Erickson, becomes to develop a sense of self, a sense of identity. They will struggle with questions such as who am I? What do I want to do with my life? What is my purpose? And most adolescents will try on many different selves to see what fits for them and what works for them, and discover who they want to be as an adult. Those who are successful get a strong sense of identity and are able to remain true to their beliefs and values. If they are apathetic, so they don't really care, or they're confused with their role, or they're bullied, or they're forced to conform by their parents or their ideas for their own future, They're likely to become unsure of their identity and confused about their future. So, teenagers that struggle in this stage are likely to also be confused and unsure how to find themselves as an adult. The next stage occurs 18 to 25 years, according to Erickson, and that's the intimacy versus isolation stage. This also, as you can imagine, is supposed to result in love. So, Erickson suggests that after we've developed a sense of self, we're ready to share our life with others. But if other stages haven't been resolved, the ability to find intimacy and love may be impaired. I'm sorry. Okay, so speaking about intimacy versus isolation, might just need to get some water later on. So basically, it's that quest to find love, but the identity must be clear, their own identity. Otherwise, Erickson suggests that they won't be able to find someone else if they had issues in the other stages, or they're just not sure about who they are, their own sense of self. Until they've resolved everything else, they won't be able to share their life. Otherwise, resulting in unsuccessful intimate relationships, and that can lead to feelings of loneliness and emotional isolation. Then a huge stage is generativity versus stagnation, which is most of people's lives, 25 to 65 years. As you can imagine, this relates to work, career, productiveness within the community. So this is basically that social task of adulthood, finding your life's work and what makes life worth living, how to help others in the community, activities such as volunteering, mentoring, raising children begin to be important. And during this stage, adults begin to contribute to the next generation, often by caring for others, including children and members of the community, doing something impactful, having important work that they view as important and fulfilling. Those who don't master the task would experience that they're not living a fulfilling life and they're not leaving a mark on the world in a meaningful way. And they will have little interest in being productive and improving oneself. Then the last stage at 65 plus years is integrity versus despair, which can result in wisdom if successful. So this is obviously old age. This is when we are becoming elderly. So this is the period of late adulthood where elderly reflect on their lives and they either feel a sense of satisfaction basically or a sense of failure leading to despair. So it's important to have lots of life accomplishments, especially in that generativity stage, so that we can attain integrity. And if we don't, more likely to result in despair, feeling bitter, depressed, thinking what could have been, all the chances I didn't take, basically. So now that I've detailed all of these for us, just a short recap of each stage and how you can sort of make a cheat sheet for your subject and for tests. Trust versus mistrust. If an infant feels cared for and loved, they're likely to develop trust. But if an infant feels as if the care is inadequate, they may develop mistrust and feel anxious and insecure. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. Our ability to do things independently as toddlers, whereas shame and doubt refers to having negative feelings about capabilities and becoming too dependent on the parents. Initiative versus guilt. This is with regards to being able to think independently, perform various actions, The other coin of it is as a child overstepping boundaries, especially with parents, with certain behaviors that cause guilt and disappointment in oneself. Industry versus inferiority. During school age, especially primary school age, the ability to feel that one is productive and performing work and other practical activities successfully, or feeling inferior if you perceive yourself as less successful than others. So the stage of comparing yourself to others. Identity versus role confusion. The overall image of oneself is being developed during and after puberty, and if unable to develop a clear sense of identity, then experiencing role confusion, not knowing who you are or where you fit in. Intimacy and isolation again, ages 18 to 25, the search for love, for caring and sharing yourself with another person. And isolation, on the other side of it, refers to a sense of being alone. Uh, Generativity versus stagnation is the major part of an individual's life, which focuses on an individual's concern about other people, including future generations and the world that they will live in. Stagnation would mean a lack of action that leads to boredom, a lack of productivity, and egotistical concern with personal needs only. And integrity versus despair refers to integrity as a sense of satisfaction with your achievements in life and how you lived your life, versus despair involves the feeling that life was full of missed opportunities and wasted years.